I was born deaf. My 3 brothers spent 33 years making sure I knew it was funny. When our mother died, they divided $73 million. The penthouse in New York, the yacht, the vineyard in Napa. 3 men in good suits splitting it in a conference room while I sat at the end of the table and watched their mouths move. Then Roland, the oldest, slid a box down the table to me. It was a shoebox. "Mom's things," he mouthed, slow and exexaggerated, the way people do when they think stretching your lips is the same as language. Sentimental stuff. Thought you'd want it. I opened it. A photograph. A key to a house already sold. And on top, laid on the tissue paper like the prize, my first hearing aid, the beige plastic one from when I was 4, that never worked, that made the world into a hiss. Snapped in half. Both pieces in the box. I looked up. All 3 of them were laughing. Not cruelly, that's the thing I need you to understand. Easily, comfortably, the way you laugh at a joke that's landed well among friends. And then my oldest brother did something he had never done in my entire life. He signed to me. He held his phone under the table where he thought I couldn't see it, and he glanced down at it, and then he lifted his hands, and he signed, slowly, badly, in the mangled word order of a man reading a foreign phrasebook off a screen. "You can't hear us laugh." Then he fingerspelled the last word, because he didn't have the sign, and he got a letter wrong, and he had to start over, and the whole time he was smiling at me like he'd done something clever. 33 years. 45 years old, my brother, and he'd never signed one word to me. Not hello, not sorry, not once. And the first full sentence Roland Falk ever signed to his deaf brother, he had to look up on his phone in a conference room so that he could tell me I couldn't hear them laughing at me. He learned my language for one sentence. That one. I put the lid back on the box. I stood up. And I walked out of my mother's estate with 2 halves of a broken hearing aid, and I didn't fight, and I didn't sign anything back, and I did not see any of them again for 7 months. 7 months later, on the 1st of May, I sat in a hospital chair while a woman turned on a cochlear implant that had been surgically installed in the side of my skull 3 weeks earlier. Free. Paid for by a donor I'd never met. I was 33 years old, and I was about to hear for the first time in my life. I'll tell you exactly what happened when she switched it on, and it isn't what you think, and it isn't what I thought either. But when it was over, I walked out into the parking lot, and there was a woman standing next to my truck. 76 years old, a raincoat, a yellow legal pad held against her chest with both arms, like a shield. She saw me coming, and she turned the pad around. She'd already written it. Big block letters, the whole page. "Mr. Falk, I was your mother's lawyer. She left a second will. Your brothers are going to lose everything. I'm sorry it took me 7 months to find you." The first words I understood after they turned on my ear did not come through my ear. They came the way every word of my life has come. Through my eyes. Off a page. From a stranger who was the first lawyer in 33 years who thought to bring something to write on. 2 things, before I go any further, because if I don't say them now, you'll spend this whole story waiting for the wrong payoff. The first is the implant. You think this is where the deaf man gets fixed and then, repaired, goes and claims what's his. It isn't. I'm going to tell you the truth about what a cochlear implant does to a man born deaf who gets one at 33, and it's going to disappoint you, and I need you to sit in that with me. I was not broken. I did not get fixed. Nothing about my ear won this. The second is the money. Yes, my brothers lost everything. But the weapon my mother used wasn't legal and it wasn't financial. It was linguistic. She destroyed her 3 oldest sons in a language they'd had 33 years to learn and hadn't bothered to, and the reason they lost is the reason they never saw it coming. They couldn't read it. It was in front of them the whole time, on her hands. That's the story. Not the money, not the ear. Now, one thing, and then I'll leave you alone about it. Somewhere in your life there is a person trying to tell you something in a language you've decided not to learn. It probably isn't sign. It's a kid who communicates in silences, a parent who says everything through food and nothing out loud, a spouse whose whole vocabulary is what they do instead of what they say. If any of that just landed on you, subscribe, because that is the only thing I ever really talk about, and this is the clearest case of it I will ever have. My name is Jonah Falk. I'm 33. I build cabinets, a shop, 3 employees, a dust problem, A waiting list I'm proud of. My wife is Dahlia. Our daughter, Iris, is 7. My mother was Ingrid Falk, and I want to tell you where the $73 million actually came from because my brothers spent their whole lives hoping nobody would ask. It came from Sheetz. In 1979, my mother was 26. She bought one industrial washing machine on credit, put it in a rented garage, and started washing linens for a motel, then a second motel, then a hospital, then a chain, Falk Linen Service. 35 years of washing other people's bedding, so well and so relentlessly, that when she sold it in 2014 it was the biggest industrial laundry in 3 states. That's the empire. The yacht, the penthouse, the vineyard, all of it came out of a building with no windows and 240 degrees of steam, run by a woman with cracked hands who never took a vacation. My brothers were embarrassed by it. 3 grown men, who never held a job she didn't hand them, quietly humiliated that the family money smelled like bleach. Roland told people we were in commercial services. My mother knew. She never said a word. She just watched. She was very good at watching. I got that from her. I want to tell you about my brothers, and I'm going to do it in the only way that actually explains them. I'm going to tell you how many signs they know. Roland is 45. He was 12 years old when I was born, 12. Old enough to read a book, ride a bus, learn a language. Kids that age pick up sign faster than anyone. Barrett was 9. Griffin was 6. Every one of them was young enough that it would have been easy and old enough that it was a choice. In 33 years, my 3 brothers learned a combined total of 4 signs. Here they are. Roland knows 2. The first is a name sign he invented at 13. In my language, a name sign is given to you by deaf people, built from a letter plus something true about you. My mother gave me mine when I was a baby, the letter J drawn out from the corner of her eye, because I was 6 months old and I watched everything. The one who sees. That's been my name my whole life. It's what my wife calls me. It's what my daughter calls me. Roland never learned it. He made his own. He makes a J and taps it against his ear, his closed ear, 32 years every time. It means the deaf one. It means the one who can't. He thinks it's affectionate. He used it in front of my daughter once and she went very still and looked at him with an expression I've never seen on a 7-year-old, and I understood my child had just learned something about her uncle that took me 20 years. Roland's second sign is stupid. Knuckles to the forehead, fast, like a joke. That's the entire vocabulary of the man who ran our mother's estate. 2 signs, both insults, over 4.5 decades. Barrett knows 1 sign, it's sorry. Fist over the heart, circling. He's very good at it. He's had practice. Barrett has signed sorry to me maybe 1,000 times, after Roland does something, after the family does something, in the doorway, in the driveway. That little circling fist and those soft eyes, he never learned a second word. It took me 30 years to understand that, and when I did, I stopped being angry at Barrett and started being sad about him. My brother learned exactly enough of my language to apologize, and not 1 syllable more. He built a vocabulary with no way to help me in it, no way to ask me anything, no way to hear an answer. Just the apology. Sorry isn't a bridge. Sorry is a toll you pay so you don't have to cross. And Griffin knows the alphabet up to M. He learned it when he was 8, on the floor with me and Mom in one afternoon, and he was good at it, fast, laughing. I was 2. It's one of my first memories, my big brother's hands making shapes at me. Then he quit. Halfway through the alphabet, he never came back. That's Griffin. My brother made it exactly halfway to me and stopped, and I've thought about that more than almost anything in my life. He was already moving. He just found something better to do that afternoon, and then it was 31 years later. 2 insults, 1 apology, and half an alphabet. 33 years. My mother, on the other hand. My mother learned American Sign Language when I was 6 months old. People hear she learned sign language and picture a woman with a book. My mother was running a laundry with 40 employees and 3 sons, and she was 39, and she had never learned anything in her life except how to work. She found a deaf woman in the city who taught. Twice a week, then 3. Then a deaf church coffee hour on Sunday afternoons where she was the only hearing person in the room, and she was terrible, and everybody was patient with her. She did that for 11 years. She was fluent by the time I was 3. Real ASL. Its own grammar, its own poetry, its own jokes that don't translate. She got good enough to be funny in it, which is the hardest thing there is. Now the dinner table, because it's the whole picture, 5 people. My mother signed to me, voiced for the others, and the others talked over her. Every night, for 18 years, my mother did simultaneous interpretation at her own family's dinner table, alone, so her youngest son could be at it, and her 3 older sons ate and let her. Not one of them ever said, "Mom, I'll take a turn." Not one of them ever said, "Let me learn some so you can eat your food." Here's what I didn't understand until this year, and neither did she until the end. They weren't ignoring me. They were letting her carry me. As long as Mom was the interpreter, I was Mom's job, her deaf one. They were free. Now, I have to complicate this because a story where the mother is perfect is a story where nobody learns anything. My mother pitied me too. Not the way they did. She never mocked me a day in her life. But in 2016 she wrote a will that split the estate 3 ways among Roland, Barrett, and Griffin, and left me a trust. $2 million, which is not nothing, with my brothers as trustees. My mother, who loved me more than anything, who gave 11 years of Sunday afternoons to be able to talk to me, signed a document saying, "My deaf son can't be trusted to hold his own money, and the men who should hold it for him are the men who mock him." She wasn't cruel. She was doing what every parent of a disabled kid gets told to do by every well-meaning advisor alive. Protect him, make sure someone's looking after him. She looked at a son with a business, a mortgage, a wife and a child, all of it built with his own hands. And some old frightened part of her still saw a 4-year-old with a broken beige hearing aid who needed managing. That's the real thing. That's the thing nobody tells you about being disabled. And it's not the mockery. The mockery's easy. It's that even the people who love you most, who did the work, who learned the language, even they can carry a small, quiet certainty that you can't handle your own life. I never knew about that will. I found out about it this year, after everything, when it didn't matter anymore. I've forgiven her completely, and it cost me nothing, because in the last year of her life my mother did the thing almost nobody ever does. She found out she was wrong about her own son. She had 13 months left. She used every one of them. In the spring of 2024, my mother was diagnosed with cancer in her throat. They operated in June. Then pneumonia, then worse, then intensive care, then a tube down her throat and a ventilator. 19 days. For 19 days, my mother could not make a sound, not a whisper. Awake for most of it. Alert, furious, 71, with a tube in her throat and both hands free. So she signed. Of course she signed. She had a language in her hands. She'd bought it with 11 years of Sunday afternoons. My mother lay in that bed and told everybody exactly what she thought in full sentences with a clarity you would not believe. And her 3 oldest sons stood around that bed and watched her hands move and understood nothing. Nothing. Roland's 2 insults, Barrett's sorry, Griffin's half an alphabet. Their mother was speaking and it was shapes to them, a woman waving. So they did what hearing people do. They talked about her. Over the bed, in front of her, open eyes. What she needed, what she'd want, whether she understood what was happening. Roland stood at the foot of my mother's bed while she was telling him something and said to a doctor, "She's not really tracking." She was tracking so hard her hands were shaking. She was calling him a word I'm not going to translate on this channel. I was there every day. For 19 days I was my mother's voice. Sit inside that for a second. For the first time in my life the family needed me. Not tolerated, needed. Every doctor, every decision, every piece of paper had to come through the deaf one, because the deaf one was the only person in the building who could hear her. On the 4th day, there was a real decision to make about her treatment. My brothers wanted one thing, she wanted the other. She told me, clearly, twice, in the plainest language she had. I turned around and told them what our mother wanted. And Roland said, "I watched his mouth, I've had 33 years of practice." Roland said, "He's making it up." There it is, the whole family in 4 words. He said I was putting words in her mouth, that I'd always wanted to be the important one, and now I had a way. Barrett looked at his shoes. Griffin looked at the wall, and my mother lay there and watched her son called a liar for repeating her own sentence and couldn't say a word to stop it, because the only mouth she had in that room was mine, and they'd just decided it didn't count. I watched her face. I'll see it until I die. My mother, who had spent 31 years learning to talk to me, lay there and understood all at once, at 71, with a tube in her throat, exactly what my life had been. Not the deafness, she always understood the deafness. She understood what it is to be in a room full of people who love you and be unreachable, to have something true and urgent in you and no way to make it cross the air, and to watch the one person who can reach you get treated as a defect in the machinery. She lived my life for 19 days. Then they took the tube out, and her voice came back over about a month. And the first thing my mother did, before she could speak above a whisper, before she was even properly out of that hospital, was call a lawyer. Not the family firm, not Roland's guys. Her own. A woman she found herself. A 74-year-old solo attorney named Adele Fontaine, who had never met a single one of us. My mother executed her second will on the 12th of August, 2024, 13 months before she died. I know exactly what she did and why, because Adele Fontaine has since walked me through every line of it, and because my mother, being my mother, wrote it all down. She did it right, and that matters, so I'll be quick. 13 months from death, not 13 days, out of the hospital, sharp, driving. A physician's letter documenting her capacity that day. Witnesses with no connection to the family. And Fontaine told her that a woman with $73 million and 3 angry sons would get challenged the moment she was in the ground, and the best defense was to be on video, competent, explaining herself. My mother thought about it. Then she said, "Fine, but I'll do it in my own language." She recorded her statement in ASL, signing. Not speaking, a hearing woman with a perfectly good recovering voice, folding her hands in her lap and then raising them. Fontaine told her it would force the court to bring in a certified interpreter and complicate everything, and was frankly unnecessary. And my mother smiled at her and said, "It's not unnecessary, it's the whole point." Here's what was in it. $250,000 each to Roland, Barrett, and Griffin, and attached to those 3 bequests, a no-contest clause, old, hard, well-drafted. In plain terms, take it, and it's yours, free and clear. Challenge this will in court and you forfeit it. Fight me and you get nothing. And the residue, the company money, the properties, the whole $73 million, to her son, Jonah. Outright. Not in a trust. Not with a trustee, not managed, not protected, not overseen by anybody. Outright. Into the hands of the deaf one. When Fontaine first told me about the $250,000, I thought my mother had gone soft at the end. She'd gone the other way. That number is the coldest, smartest thing she ever did, and she built a company out of nothing, so that's saying something. Fontaine wrote it out for me on a legal pad. A no-contest clause is only a weapon if there's something to lose. Leave a son $1 and he'll sue you for free. Leave him $250,000 and now he has to bet it. Your mother priced it exactly high enough to be worth taking, and exactly low enough to be unbearable next to what his brother was getting. Then she wrote one more line, and her mouth went tight while she wrote it. She said to me, in this office, "Roland won't be able to help himself." My mother didn't leave her sons a trap. She left them a mirror, and she bet her entire estate on what they'd do when they looked in it. She was right. Of course she was right. She'd been watching them for 45 years. They contested it inside of 3 weeks. My mother died on the 18th of September, 2025. She was 72. I was in the room, and had been most of a week. At the end I signed to her and she was past answering, but her eyes tracked my hands until they didn't. That's how my mother and I said goodbye. The same way we'd said everything for 32 years, in the air between us, in the only language that was ever fully ours. My brothers arrived 4 hours later. You already know about the conference room in October. The box. Roland's phone under the table. Here's the piece you don't have. The will they read me was the 2016 one. The old one. They knew about the second. Adele Fontaine had filed my mother's 2024 will with the probate court within days of her death, exactly as the law requires, and Roland's lawyers had known since the first week. They'd already moved to invalidate it, undue influence, lack of capacity. Their filing said, in the polite way lawyers say things, that the deaf son had isolated a sick old woman and manipulated her, and that a woman signing on a video was self-evidently a woman being led. So, in October, my 3 brothers read me an outdated will and slid me my broken hearing aid in a shoebox, while a case was live 11 miles away in which they were arguing I'd defrauded our dying mother. Not one of them mentioned it. They let me open the box. They let Roland do his phone-signed sentence. And they let me walk out thinking I'd been left nothing but a joke, because as long as I didn't know, I wasn't going to show up. It never occurred to any of the three of them that I was a person who needed telling. Information had reached me late, second-hand, or never for 33 years, and they'd gotten so used to it that leaving me out of a lawsuit about my own character didn't feel like a decision. It felt like Tuesday. So I walked. I didn't hire anyone. I didn't call anyone. I never touched the $2 million trust. Not $1, not ever, because taking it meant asking Roland's permission, and I would have gone hungry first, and there were a couple of winters where that was closer than I'd like to admit. I went back to my shop. I built cabinets. I put the two halves of the hearing aid in a drawer, and in November we sold our house and moved 40 minutes north for a place with a bigger garage and a school Iris liked better. And I left no forwarding address with anyone named Falk, and I meant it. And that is how a 76-year-old lawyer holding my mother's love spent 7 months unable to find me. Adele Fontaine tried to reach me for 7 months. She's told me all of it, and every piece of it is funny in a way that makes me want to put my head down on a table. She wrote 4 certified letters to the address my mother gave her in 2024. My old house, which we'd sold, where a family lived now who'd never heard of me. The family's lawyers served notice of the contest to that same old address. I'll be fair and say they probably didn't work hard at it. I'll be honest and say they didn't have to try to fail. The address was in the file. The file was old. Nobody checked. And Adele Fontaine, 76, practicing alone out of the same 2 rooms since 1981, did the thing that had worked for 45 years. She called my cell. The number in my mother's file, still my number, I've had it a decade. It rang. I didn't answer. I'm deaf. I have never answered a phone in my life. So she left a voicemail. Then she called the next week and left another. And another. For 7 months, Adele Fontaine left voicemails for a deaf man about his mother's will, into a mailbox I have never once opened, on a phone I use only to text and to video call in sign. 31 voicemails. She counted, she told me, and she cried while she did it, and she is not a woman who cries. Here's the part that undid me. Adele Fontaine did not know I was deaf. She met my mother in the summer of 2024, in a hospital corridor and then in her office, for maybe 15 or 20 hours total across a year. And in all those hours, my mother, who did nothing by accident, never once said the words, my deaf son. She said my son Jonah. She said Jonah's a cabinet maker. She said Jonah has a daughter. She said Jonah's the one who was there. She talked about me the way you talk about a person, not a condition, and it never came up because to my mother it was no more the headline than my height. So a lawyer left 31 voicemails for a man who cannot hear because his mother refused, to the very end, to introduce him as a defect. It cost me 7 months. It's also the most loving thing she ever did for me. Both are true. The world's default settings will erase you, and nobody has to be a villain for it. A good lawyer used a phone. A good mother used her son's name. And the truth sat 11 miles away for 7 months while I sanded drawer fronts and told myself I'd made my peace. Which brings me to March, and the email I nearly deleted. On the 20th of March, 2026, 16 days after my 33rd birthday, I got an email from a clinic I'd never heard of saying that a cochlear implant had been funded in my name by a private donor, that the funding had been sitting there since 2024, and would I like to schedule a consultation? I assumed it was a scam. I want that on the record too, because it's very funny to me now. I nearly deleted my mother's last gift as spam. It sat in my archive for 5 days. The surgeon was a woman named Dr. Amara Osei, and she is the reason I said yes, and it has nothing to do with the surgery. I brought Dahlia because Dahlia interprets for me at medical appointments. My wife is hearing, and she learned ASL in about a year when we started dating, which I mention only so you can hold it up next to 33 years and 4 signs. The first thing Dr. Osei did was look at me. Not at Dahlia, at me. She kept her eyes on my face and waited for Dahlia's hands to finish before she went on. If you're hearing, you have no idea how rare that is. Doctors talk to the interpreter, doctors talk to the wife. 33 years of being discussed over my own head, and this woman looked at me the whole time. Then she told me the truth. She said, you were born deaf. You've never processed speech. Your brain built itself for 33 years with no sound in it, and it spent that real estate on other things. Your eyes mostly, which is why you catch what nobody else catches. The window for wiring speech into a human brain closes early. Children implanted at 1 or 2 do beautifully. An adult implanted at 33 who has never heard a word. And she stopped and made sure I was looking at her. You will almost certainly never understand speech. Not with practice, not with time. Most adults in your situation get environmental sound, a door, an alarm. Something happened somewhere. Many of my patients like you stop wearing it inside a year, and that's a completely reasonable thing to do, and I won't think less of you for it. I'll do it if you want it. But I won't lie to you to get you into my operating room. Then she asked me a question, and I need you to understand it was the first time in my entire life anyone in a white coat had asked me anything. She said, "What do you want out of this? Not here's what you need, not here's what we can fix. What do you want?" And I didn't have an answer because nobody had ever asked. And it turns out when nobody asks for 33 years, you stop keeping the answer anywhere you can find it. Let me say this part very clearly, because deaf people are watching this, and we've had this story told about us wrong our entire lives. I did not do it because I was broken. I'm not broken. Deafness isn't a wound. It's a language and a people and a way of seeing. And if you offered me a button that made me hearing tomorrow, I wouldn't push it. I'd have said that at 8, and I'd say it now. My brothers thought the hearing aid was the punchline. The hearing aid was never the point. I threw mine away when I was 9 because it turned the world into a hiss, and my mother let me. I said yes for exactly one reason, and it took me 2 days to find it. I went back and signed it, and Dahlia voiced it, and I watched Dr. Osie's face while she got it. I said, "My daughter is 7. I know exactly what her laugh looks like. I've known since she was a baby. I know the shape of her whole face when it happens, better than any hearing father knows anything about his kid, because I've had to. I have never known whether it makes a sound. I'm not asking you to make me understand her. We understand each other fine. I want to know if it has a sound, that's all. Even if it's just a shape. Even if it's nothing." Dr. Osie was quiet for a second, then she said, "That I might be able to do. They operated on the 8th of April. It went fine. And then nothing happened because they don't turn it on. That's the part nobody knows. There's no switch in the operating room. You go home with a shaved patch and a headache, and you wait 3 weeks with a magnet in your skull doing nothing. Activation was the 1st of May. Dahlia came. Iris came, because she'd made us promise. 7 years old in a plastic chair, swinging her legs, hands going the whole time, narrating the room to me in sign like a tiny sportscaster. She's done that since she was 3. Nobody taught her. To Iris, that's just what you do when you love someone who sees instead of hears. The audiologist put the processor on my head. The magnet clicked, and she turned it on. Something arrived, that's the only honest way I can say it. Something arrived in my head that had never been there. Not a sound, I don't really have the word sound. I have a concept of it the way you have a concept of a color you've never seen. Something came in from outside and was there. Rough. Enormous. Like the whole room had a texture and somebody laid it against the inside of my skull. They tell me the audiologist was saying, "Jonah, can you hear me?" I didn't know that. To me it was grinding. Static with edges. Somebody dragging furniture in another building. There were no words in it anywhere, and no way to get words out of it. The way there's no way to get a phone number out of a thunderstorm. Dahlia was crying, and I understood from her face that my wife thought I was hearing her. Then Iris signed at me from her chair, the way she has her whole life, "Daddy, is it working?" And I had to tell my daughter the truth. It was working perfectly. It was doing exactly what Dr. Osie said. It was noise, and it would always be noise, and I was 33 years too late. I laughed. That's what I actually did. I laughed because it was absurd. 40 years of people telling me what a miracle it would be, a good surgeon cutting a hole in my head, a machine that costs more than my truck, and what I got was a garbage disposal running in the next county. And underneath the laugh, a small, embarrassing grief. And it wasn't about words. I never wanted the words. I'd wanted to know about the laugh, and I'd just learned the world's noise arrives all at once, undifferentiated, and I couldn't pick my daughter out of it any more than you could pick one voice out of a jet engine. So I said thank you, and signed to Iris that we'd try again another day and went out to get the truck. And there was a very old woman standing next to it in a raincoat, holding a yellow legal pad against her chest with both arms. She'd been waiting 2 hours. She'd found me through the implant. That's the part I still can't hold. The surgery was paid for out of a small account my mother funded in 2024 and left in Fontaine's care. When I finally said yes in March, the clinic billed it. Fontaine saw the charge, called the clinic, a call she could actually make because audiologists answer phones, and asked when Mr. Falk's activation appointment was. My mother spent 7 months unable to reach me from the grave. Then she reached me with the only thing she had left. She bought a machine for my head, and the receipt led her lawyer to a parking lot. Fontaine kept flipping pages. She'd written it all out in advance. Page 2 was the will. Page 3, the $250,000 and the trap. Page 4, the contest, 7 months live, my brothers arguing to a judge that I'd manipulated a dying woman. Page 5 said, there is a video. She recorded it in ASL. She refused to speak. I put my hand on the truck because my legs weren't entirely mine. Page 6 said, Mr. Falk, I have left you 31 voicemails. I looked up and she had her hand over her mouth, and I watched a 76-year-old lawyer understand, standing in a parking lot, exactly why she'd never gotten a call back. I took the pad. I wrote, you didn't know. Her hand shook while she answered. I've kept the page. She never said it. In a year, she never once said you were deaf. She said, my son Jonah. I have been a lawyer for 45 years, and I have never been so professionally humiliated and so personally moved by the same fact. Then, she told me you'd be hard to find. I thought she meant estranged. She meant I wouldn't know how to look. We sat in my truck for 2 hours and wrote until the pad ran out, and then wrote on the backs of my invoices. 90 pages of 2 people writing at each other in a parking lot. It's in a box in my shop. It's better than any recording anybody ever made of anything. Around the 60th page, she wrote, the hearing is in 7 weeks. If you appear, we will win because of the video. If you don't, they'll take it by default, and I will have failed her. Will you come? I sat there with a magnet in my skull that had delivered me nothing but noise that morning. I thought about a shoebox, and I wrote one word. Yes. The hearing was the 22nd of June. My brothers had 4 lawyers. Roland wore a suit that cost more than my table saw. Barrett wouldn't look at me. Griffin looked at me for about a second and a half and then found the wall, the way he found the wall in the ICU. I had Adele Fontaine, 76, alone, with a rolling cart. And 2 court interpreters, one for me, so I could follow, and one for the video. Appreciate that for a second. Roland's $400 an hour lawyers had to formally request a certified ASL interpreter in advance, in writing, so their clients could understand what their own mother had said. My brothers filed a motion to be able to hear their mom. Their case took the morning, and it was well built. She'd been sick, isolated, dependent. A woman who signs on video is a woman being coached. You can't tell from hands whether a person means it. A will leaving $73 million to a son with his condition, and $250,000 each to 3 healthy sons was so unnatural on its face that the only explanation was influence. And Roland's lead lawyer said, out loud, I read it off his mouth and then got it again a half second later from the interpreter, which is a thing that happens to me a lot. Mr. Jonah Falk was the only person in that hospital room who could communicate with the dissident. He controlled every word that entered and left her. He had, quite literally, the only voice she had, and he used it. He meant it as an accusation. It's the truest sentence anybody said all day. I did have the only voice she had. That's exactly what happened. He just had the direction of the crime backwards. Then Fontaine got up, 76, slow, and she hadn't objected to a single thing all morning, and said, more or less, Your Honor, rather than argue, I'd ask the court to let Mrs. Falk address the question herself. And she played the video. My mother came up on that screen and I stopped breathing. Green blouse I'd seen 1,000 times. Thin. Her voice was still hoarse then, and she never used it. She folded her hands. She found the lens the way you find someone's eyes because 11 years of Sunday afternoons had taught her that, in my language, you look at people. And she raised her hands. Here's what happened next, and it's the reason I'm telling you any of this. I understood her instantly, directly. Her hands moved and her meaning was just there in me. No translation, no delay, the way it's always been. My mother was in the room and she was talking to me, and behind me, a half second behind because that's the lag, that's always the lag. A stranger's voice started saying my mother's words to everybody else. 3 hearing men sat in that courtroom and had a court employee they'd never met tell them what their mother was saying. Their own mother, on a screen, speaking clearly, and they needed a translator. And their deaf brother sat there and got her first. Every sentence, a half second ahead of the entire room for 11 straight minutes. That's what she did. That's what the whole thing was for. Adele Fontaine told her it would complicate the proceeding, and she said it's not unnecessary, it's the whole point, and this was the point. She built a room where the only person who could hear her was me. I'm going to give you what she said in English now. Understand that English is a translation. She said it in ASL, and ASL is in English on the hands. Different grammar, different shape, things it can do that English can't. Some of what my mother said doesn't survive the trip. The best of it doesn't. But here's what fits. She said, "My name is Ingrid Falk. Today is the 12th of August, 2024. I'm 71. I'm sick, not stupid, and there's a letter from my doctor about that in the file, so let's not waste anyone's afternoon. I'm signing this instead of speaking it. My lawyer says that'll make trouble for the court. Good. I'm signing it because the only person in this family I'm actually talking to is my youngest son. The rest of you will need a stranger to tell you what your mother just said. That's not cruelty. That's my whole answer. If you want to know why I did what I did with my money, look around the room right now and notice who had to be told. Roland, you're 43 years old. You were 12 when your brother was born. 12. You had 31 years and you learned 2 signs, and one of them is a name you made up for him, and the other one is stupid. I've watched you do both. You think I never saw. I saw everything. I always saw everything. I just kept hoping you'd grow into something. Barrett, you know one word. It's sorry. You've said it to him 1,000 times. You never learned a second one, and I want you to understand what that means, because I don't think you ever have. You built yourself a way to feel bad and no way to help. Sorry isn't a bridge, Barrett. It's a toll. Griffin, you know A to M. You were 8 and you were so fast and you laughed the whole afternoon and you were better at it than I was. And then you stopped. My boy made it halfway to his brother and stopped. Of all the things in this, that's the one I'll be thinking about at the end. In June, I spent 19 days with a tube in my throat, and I could not make a sound. I signed at you, all 3 of you, for 19 days. You stood over my bed and talked about me like I was a chair. And when Jonah told you what I wanted, when he said my words exactly, Roland said, "He's making it up." You called my son a liar for telling you the truth I put in his hands. That room is the only reason this document exists. I found out what it is to be surrounded by people who love you and have no way to reach them. I've been sorry for my son his whole life, and 19 days taught me I had it backwards. He's not the one missing something. You are. All 3 of you, and you don't know it, because nobody ever made you lie in a bed and need it. So, the money. I'm leaving each of you $250,000, and there's a clause attached that says, if you fight me, you lose it. Take it, please take it. I am asking you from a green chair in a lawyer's office, while I'm still here to ask, take the money and don't fight, and you'll be fine, and we'll have ended this quietly. You won't. Roland, you won't be able to help yourself, and Barrett will go along with you and be sorry about it, and Griffin will look at the wall. I know exactly who I raised. I raised you. And the rest goes to Jonah, outright, not in a trust, nobody managing it, nobody protecting him from it. In 2016, I wrote a will putting my son's money under his brother's control. Put that on the record too, because it's the worst thing I ever did, and nobody made me do it. I looked at a grown man with a business and a wife and a child, and still saw somebody who needed handling. I did to him, in a legal document, exactly what everyone's done to him his whole life, and I told myself it was love. It was fear. It was mine. He doesn't need protecting. He never did. He's the most capable person in this family, and I'm including myself. Jonah, look at me. You're going to be the only one who gets this without help, so I'm going to say it to you and let them wait for it. You were not the burden. You were the reason I learned anything. Everything I know that's worth knowing, I learned in a church basement on Sunday afternoons for 11 years because of you. I was 39, and I couldn't do anything but work, and you gave me a language and a whole world of people in it, And it's the only thing I ever earned that I'm actually proud of. Not the company, not the money, not 1 square foot of that penthouse. You gave me a second language, and your brothers didn't want it, and that's not your loss, it's theirs. It was always theirs. I'm leaving it to you because it's yours. It always was. I'm just finally saying so where it counts. Then she put her hands down in her lap, and the interpreter's voice stopped, and the room was quiet. And Barrett was crying. I want to say that. My middle brother had his hand over his eyes and his shoulders were going, and I looked at him and I thought, you learned 1 word and you're about to use it again, and it still isn't going to be a bridge. The will was upheld. It wasn't close. I'm told judges rarely rule from the bench in a contested estate, and that we got the fast version because of the video. The undue influence claim needed her to have been led. Nobody who watched those 11 minutes was going to believe Ingrid Falk had ever been led anywhere in her life. Then the clause did what it was built to do. They'd contested, so they forfeited. $250,000 each, gone. Not taken from them. Declined by them 7 months earlier, in a filing they paid for. That's not the part that finished them, though. They'd been living in it for 7 months. Roland had the penthouse from November. Griffin had the vineyard and had been running it badly and sinking money into it that wasn't his. The yacht, which my mother bought in 2016 because they wore her down and went out on exactly twice and hated, had been Roland's since the week after the funeral. All of it spent against an estate they'd been formally warned might not be theirs, on the advice of lawyers who told them they'd win. None of it was ever theirs. Not for a day. So it comes back, and what can't come back gets accounted for, and that machinery is grinding right now and will grind for another year. And Roland, this is the piece I found out last month and had to sit down about, Roland had borrowed against it. He took loans against an inheritance he had not received and did not have, because he was certain, because he has been certain about everything his entire life. My oldest brother is going to come out of my mother's estate owing money, not with less. Owing. I didn't do that. I want to be very clear, because there's a version of this where I'm the avenger, and it isn't true, and it isn't even interesting. I did nothing. I showed up in a courtroom on the 22nd of June, and I sat in a chair and I watched a video. My mother did it. And she barely did it. She just declined to protect them from themselves for the first time in 45 years. She left the door unlocked and told them not to go through it, and knew exactly which one of them would. The last thing she ever built, and it was the only thing she ever built out of them instead of for them. There was a second recording. Fontaine gave it to me in the hallway afterward, on a drive, in an envelope with my name on it in my mother's handwriting. My mother had been specific. The first video is for the court. This one is for Jonah, and it is not evidence, and no lawyer is ever going to sit in a room and read my son's mail. I watched it that night at my kitchen table. Dahlia beside me, Iris on my lap in pajamas. Same green blouse. Same chair. Same afternoon. She recorded them back to back. You can see it. She signed to me for 6 minutes. Most of it is mine and I'm keeping it. But there's one part I'll tell you because it's the only reason I told this story at all. At the end she said, signing, "There's one more thing and it's already done, so don't argue with me about it. I'm on a recording and I win. I've paid for a cochlear implant for you. It's in an account with Adele. It's not a gift with strings and it is not me trying to fix you, and if you think that for 1 second I'll come back and haunt you. You're not broken. You have never been broken. I've known that since you were 6 months old, and you looked at my face like you were reading a book. It's there because nobody ever asked you. Your whole life, people decided things about your body and your school and your future in rooms you weren't in. I did it too. I did it in 2016 with a lawyer and a pen, and I'm ashamed of it. So, it's yours if you want it, and it is exactly as much yours to refuse. I won't be here to see which you choose. I'd be proud of you either way." And then my mother did something she had not done in 32 years. She put her hands down, she looked into the camera, and she took a breath, and my mother, who had a perfectly good hearing voice her whole life, who used it every day with everyone else, who never once in my entire life aimed it at me because she had something better. My mother spoke, out loud, at me, 4 or 5 words. I watched her mouth make them. She was crying, and she was smiling at the same time, and she was doing it badly, haltingly, the way you'd speak a language you'd never practiced, because in a sense she never had. She was a woman who had spent 11 years learning not to need her own voice, betting in a lawyer's office in August that by the time her son saw this he might have an ear. She was betting on a machine I hadn't agreed to yet. I had the processor on. I hadn't taken it off since May. I'd been wearing it around the shop, letting the world grind at me, mostly because Iris liked it. And I heard something. I want to be so honest with you here. I did not hear my mother's voice. There is no world in which I heard my mother's voice, and Dr. Osi told me that in March, and she was right to tell me. I heard a shape. Something arrived, a soft, rough, rising thing. 4 or 5 pulses of texture, and then it stopped. That's what my mother's voice is to me. That's all it will ever be. A shape with no words in it, 4 or 5 beats long. And I turned to Dahlia, and Dahlia had both hands over her mouth, and she was gone. She was no help at all, and I felt something small and cold go through me, because I understood that the last thing my mother ever said to me was a sound, and a sound is the one thing on this earth I cannot keep. And then a 7-year-old climbed up onto the table. Iris knelt in front of the laptop, and she rewound it herself. She watched her grandmother's mouth. And then she turned around and faced her father and my daughter, who hears, who has heard every day of her life, who learned my language before she learned to read because nobody told her not to. My daughter lifted her hands, and she signed very slowly, very carefully, the way she does when she wants to get something exactly right. Grandma said, "Jonah. Jonah, it's Mama, I love you." And then she added, "Because she's 7, and because she is the single best thing I have ever been part of making." Should I say it again? I said yes. She said it again 4 times. My daughter interpreted my mother's voice for me, at my own kitchen table, 4 times, until I could hold it. That's how I got the last words my mother ever said to me. Not through the hole in my skull. Not through a machine. Not through the miracle everybody promised me my whole life. Through a child's hands. Through my eyes. The same way I have received every single thing that has ever mattered to me. I saw my brothers one more time, in a hallway, after. Roland came at me the way Roland comes at everything. I got about half of it off his mouth. You knew, you set her up, 30 years playing the victim. And behind him Barrett was doing the fist over the heart, and that little circle, sorry, and Griffin was looking at the wall. I let him finish. Then I raised my hands, and I signed to my brothers. Slowly, clearly, the best I've ever signed in my life, my hands completely steady, and I said everything I had. It took about a minute. They watched my hands move. All 3 of them. And they understood nothing. Not one word. Roland's face did a thing I'd never seen on it, which was confusion. Actual confusion. A man waiting for the subtitles to come up. And when I was done, I put my hands down and I walked out. I didn't translate it. Nobody translated it. There was no interpreter in that hallway, and there never will be. For 1 minute, my brothers stood in a room and watched somebody they were related to tell them something that mattered, and got nothing, and had no way to get it, and had to just live in it. 1 minute. I've had 33 years. Was that cruel? I've turned it over a lot. Here's where I've landed, and you can disagree with me. Plenty of people have. I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it because at 33 years old, standing in a courthouse hallway, I finally understood something it had never once occurred to me I was allowed to understand. I am not required to translate myself for people who won't come and meet me. That's not revenge. That's the first boundary I ever set in my life, and I set it at 33, and I'd like the 10-year-old version of me to know it happened. I'll tell you what I said, though, because I don't want you to think it was a curse. I said, I forgive you. I said, not because you've earned it, you haven't. And not because Mom would want it, though she would. I'm doing it because carrying the 3 of you around has been the heaviest thing in my life, and being deaf has never been heavy at all, and I'm putting you down now. And I said, she left you a language. 33 years, it was right there, in the house, for free, and it was the only thing she had that was actually hers, and you didn't take it. That's the only thing you were ever really disinherited from. She just made it official. Then I went home. A few things, and then I'm done. The implant. I still have it. I wear it maybe half the days. It has never given me a word, and it never will, and Dr. Osi was right about all of it, and I've stopped being sad about that because the gift was never hearing. The gift was that somebody asked. One woman, out of everybody, in 33 years, decided that what I wanted was a real question with a real answer. Then she died before she could hear it, and she'd already said she'd be proud of me either way. If you're hearing and you take one thing from a deaf cabinet maker today, take that. Ask. Ask the person instead of solving them. The money. I kept it. All of it, and I won't perform being uncomfortable about it, because performing modest is just one more way of agreeing I shouldn't have it. But I sold the penthouse, the vineyard, and that stupid boat. My mother never wanted any of them. They were things her sons wanted, and she bought them the way she did everything for those three, which was to make them stop asking. That money is a fund now, and it does one thing. It pays for sign language classes. Free. Any family, anywhere, with a deaf kid. No cost, no application, no proving you deserve it. One rule. The classes aren't for the deaf kid. The deaf kid is fine. The deaf kid has a language, and if you leave them with other deaf people, they'll be fluent and funny and whole inside a year. The classes are for everybody else, the parents, the brothers, the sisters, the uncle who's going to be 45 one day with 2 signs to his name. Because that's what this whole thing is actually about, and it took my mother 19 days on a ventilator to see it, and it took me 33 years. Everybody in my life thought my deafness was my problem to solve. Fix his ears, get him a device, teach him to talk. And the entire time the actual problem sat on the other side of the dinner table with a fork in its hand and 2 working ears and never learned a word. It's not a shared silence. It never was. It's one person carrying a whole language alone, while 3 people who could pick up an end of it don't, and everybody calls that his condition. I won't ask if you know somebody like my brothers. You do. So here's what I'll leave you with instead. Last Sunday I came into the kitchen and my daughter had our neighbor's kid at the table, a boy from down the street, and she had his hands in hers and she was moving his fingers into shapes, and she was correcting him, patiently, the way you'd correct a golf swing. He was terrible. He was laughing. He was 7. And she looked up at me and signed, he wanted to know how to say your name. Not the mocking J at the ear, the real one, the one my mother made in 1993 for a baby who watched everything. That took an afternoon. My brothers had 33 years. Whoever you're thinking about right now, the one who talks in silences, or in food, or in the things they do instead of the things they say, I want you to notice that you already know exactly who they are, because you thought of them by the 2nd sentence of this video. Go learn 1 word of it. 1. You have an afternoon. Tell me in the comments what the word is and who it's for. And if you're the person in your family who's been carrying the whole language alone, subscribe and sit with me a while, because I know exactly how heavy it is and I'd like you to know somebody's saying so out loud. My brother had to look up my language on his phone to tell me I couldn't hear him laughing. My mother spent 11 years of Sunday afternoons learning it so she could tell me one thing. Both of them got what they paid for.